Mr. Chair, I'm not here to speak morally about sex. There are enough people who will do that in other ventures. Nor am I speaking about the Church on behalf of the Church of England. I have no authority to speak on the Church of England's behalf. But I'm speaking as the parish priest and rector of St Anne's in Soho. And it's from that role as rector that I'm actually concerned about what this legislation may do. For those for whom I have their cure of souls, as the local parish priest, it is something that is given to the bishop, the care and the responsibility of people's spiritual needs in my parish. This includes a large number of sex workers. I cannot pretend you're not in my parish. I occasionally get whistled at, and when you reach my age, any whistling is great. But nor can I abdicate my responsibility for all people in my parish. When I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I was brought back to the story of a woman caught in the act of adultery in the Bible. And this woman was dragged out by men. It was a bit like a dawn raid. She was dragged out, probably trying to cover her modesty, as men were debating her fate. There was violence. She was thrown down to the ground, and actually Christ meets her in the muck and the dirt. And he asks, "Where are they who condemn you?" And probably as he looks at the people who are standing condemning, he's thinking, "I know your sin. I know your sin." And there are lots of people who will want to accuse and say about the working women and guys about who their sin in people's eyes may be visible. But the thing about the story is that in this, it's the actions of Jesus that are important. He meets where they're at. He doesn't allow the politics that is being played out to be used against this woman. And let's face it, a stone to the head and a breeze block or whatever is not going to help. But they're also trying to trap him. And I thought the story is very much about dignity. He treats the woman as she is, with love and compassion. There are lots who will want to condemn sex workers, and the church hasn't done very well over the generations. I don't want to condemn people who live in my parish. I want to be their priest. Secondly, it's about standing alongside people who are abused. And I think over the last number of months, as I've got to know some of the sex workers in Soho, they are not being abused by men who may use their services, but actually they are abused as people are using them as pawns in a wider debate. Jesus meets the woman in the dirt. And there are lots of people who see sex workers as in the dirt. You are worth nothing in people's eyes. And until people realise that your grandmothers, mothers, daughters and sisters, and brothers, sorry, I forgot about the guys as well, that until people realise that, you will continue not to be seen and invisible. Much has been said about this proposed legislation. Some wish to see it enacted, saying that it will protect women from predatory males, stating that sex workers are in effect raped when they engage in sex and it's against their will. And we've already heard what Nikki has said about consent. Others will say that a vast proportion of sex workers are trafficked, and so this legislation will stop trafficking. Whilst others will say it will give a new hope and dignity to sex workers. But it doesn't quite work. How do you give hope and dignity through criminalising someone? There are many agendas ranging from political expediency to the feminist lobby, and also religious fundamentalism. There is no care or compassion for sex workers, and a legislation that will force women and men onto the streets cannot be argued as being in the best interest of sex workers. As I've walked about Soho and met some of the sex workers, I have also been approached, and when they see the collar, they may occasionally say, "Oh, sorry, Father." But I've asked the question with the sex workers, are they trafficked? The answer has been no. I have not met any who are chemically controlled, nor have I met any who have said they are controlled for gain. Now, you will have people who will argue that's because I haven't looked. A few weeks ago, I met with Maria and some of the other women in the rectory. And all of those women said that they had gone into this voluntarily. They were happy to remain in this profession. However, they are concerned what this legislation may do. 2 years ago, after the 5 women were killed in Ipswich, I presided at Mass. I prayed for and preached about the 5 women. I referred to them as daughters, sisters, and mothers, and not to hide what they had done, but so as it would remove their invisibility. It removed the fact that it was just 5 hookers who were killed, and actually it was 5 people. At the end of the service, some of our elderly ladies were in tears. One thanked me for reminding them that these women were human. In Soho, I have spoken to residents, I've spoken to the school, the local police, individual members of the Soho Society, and other groups, and all without exception have said the problem has not been the sex workers in the flats. There have been 1 or 2 issues with clip joints, but the main issue is not with women who work in the flats. The head teacher of the local school is actually seeking to meet with the ECP because to build up relationships there. They are and there is concern that if these women and men are forced back onto the street, then not only will it make things very public, and I'm sure the Council will bring in other legislation to deal with that, but actually it will increase the risk. In Soho, we have witnessed the targeting of safe premises, and receptionists who are the first line of defence beginning to feel frightened, and this is wrong. And whilst the idea to criminalise clients who pay for the sexual services of a prostitute is deemed to be working within this legislation and seeing people as controlled for gain, how can men check if people are trafficked? It is nonsensical. My concern as the rector of Soho is any legislation such as this will drive people underground, and rather than remove prostitution from our land, it will remove sex from the safety of a room with a receptionist about, and will push sex workers back into cars or on bits of waste ground, or pacing about as lone workers. Some of these people who are pushing for this have never met a prostitute. I have met a number of prostitutes. Please be careful how that is quoted back. They are not the scourge on society. They are not disgusting things that should not be in a nice society. They are people. And in finishing, I want to say that the choices that you have made, whilst I may not agree with them fully, I am not going to dehumanise you or disrespect what you do. And if you are in my parish, I am your priest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Finally, as a priest, I hope this legislation is radically examined and amended. I don't want to officiate at the funeral of any sex worker in my patch and have to say to a government, "I told you so." It wouldn't work. nor do I want to see the indignity of people forced back onto the streets or sex workers living in fear of attack. I would much rather see a government who will meet with the ECP, with the GMB union, and even discuss a voluntary code about safety, how a government can seek to support men and women in the sex industry to ensure that trafficking doesn't happen, to deal with issues where some sex workers are controlled, and to make the lives of sex workers a lot safer within our society. And finally, as rector of Soho, I'm proud to be the parish priest in a wonderful place with such wonderful people about.